Yeah, and he's a really
It's already been announced.
Today I wish to address US sensitivities about Julian Assange. Julian Assange, Australia's political prisoner, is waiting on his final request for appeal, to appeal against being extradited to the US. If extradited to the US, he will face the espionage court. That court does not allow the defence of publishing in the public interest. That's what Julian was doing, what he was arrested for, publishing facts in the public interest. Recently, we had a visit from Secretary Blinken. He brought a picture of a kangaroo painted with the stars and stripes. Make what you will of that. He said he understood our sensitivities about Julian, but that US sensitivities are more important. What are the US sensitivities? Julian shone a light into the dark soul of the US military complex. Secrets of murder, understated civilian deaths, torture, spying, and illegal detention. Dirty truths hidden from the people. The US is sensitive about that. No one was ever charged for those crimes, but they locked up the publisher. And they are sensitive that we might think they are suppressing free press. So Julian was defamed and ridiculed to distract us from that. As Julian says, it doesn't suit the Western establishment narrative that, yes, the West has political prisoners. Julian is a political prisoner and there are others. No state accepts to call the people it is imprisoning or detaining for political reasons political prisoners. They don't call them political prisoners in China, they don't call them political prisoners in Russia, and they don't call them political prisoners in the US, UK or Australia. They are sensitive about having that kind of self-perception. Our government is bending over backwards to accommodate US sensitivities, giving land for bases, agreeing to make weapons, violating the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, contemplating missile testing on Aboriginal land, storing weapons-grade nuclear waste, embedding US spies in our national security, Vietnam, Maralinga and Iraq all rolled up in one. All that giving. And yet, Secretary Blinken uses his visit here to tell us to our face that he is not going to free our journalists. Such contempt. Have we lost our self-respect so that our leaders stand silent in response to such contempt? Julian could see a pattern. He said that the US is attempting to apply its jurisdiction to all countries in the world, to reach into other countries and destroy their sovereignty by demanding that its laws apply to other people's territories. This is happening right now, right here, and our government is enabling it. Does it feel like we are being drip-fed one revelation about AUKUS after another, one shock after another? As Julian says, the US response to the release of WikiLeaks material betrays a belief that its power resides in the disparity of information in this way, that more knowledge is for the empire, ever less for the subjects. Enough is enough, said Prime Minister Albanese. He's doing quiet diplomacy for Julian. Rex Patrick applied through Freedom of Information and found no records of any such correspondence, all off the record. There is a way for governments to overcome their sensitivities. Julian suggests there are two choices. The first is that they can simply stop doing things that embarrass the public. So instead of committing an unjust act, commit a just act. Instead of hiding something, explain it. That's one choice. The other choice is that they can spend more on their security. They can become more baroque. They can take things off the record, speak orally and continue with this course of unjust action. Noam Chomsky said, this is how governments manufacture the people's consent, by keeping us ignorant and feeding us half-truths that make us afraid, so that we'd rather cede our sovereignty to the US than live with the remote fear of a Chinese invasion. This is why we need brave journalism and free press. As Julian says, it gives us a choice. If you have information about how the world is working around you, then you have a choice about what you support, what you don't support, what you do with your life. I support Julian Assange and our right to know the truth. How can you support? Attend the rallies around Sydney on Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. Talk to your local members and ask them to stand up for Julian. Write letters to the PM, the American Embassy. Demand more information about AUKUS and for the people to be informed and properly consulted. Read the book by Niels Melzer on the trial of Julian Assange. There's only one decision: no extradition. Julian Assange is a son of Australia, a brilliant innovator, a courageous publisher. We should be sensitive to the US holding him as a political prisoner and let our government know that Australian sensitivities come first. Free Assange.
Welcome to the 194th week of Julian Assange Sydney Town Hall gatherings. Julian Assange once said that everyone on the internet forms part of the largest bullshit detecting machine the world has ever seen. The current push by the Australian government to combat misinformation and disinformation on the internet through new legislation should be taken as evidence that people freely communicating on the internet threatens those in power. When we talk about those in power, we are talking about a non-transparent hierarchy of control, which is largely hidden from view and is heavily obfuscated by propaganda narratives. Julian Assange revealed that our governments routinely classify information to hide what they do and how they operate. We cannot clearly see those who are truly in power and how they operate, but we are increasingly gaining awareness that those in power operate globally and that governments around the world are in lockstep. with that power, and national sovereignty appears non-existent. In recent times, some things have become very clear. We know the so-called democratic system we were brought up to believe in is far from democratic. Governments and media work together to give the impression we live in a democracy, but the overt suppression of free speech shows us that any democracy we may have thought we had is an illusion. We all know that many people are suffering needlessly, and that the wealth of the people is relentlessly transferred to large corporations. We are realizing that we have a dire need to be better informed about the deeper workings of our government, and we are learning that we need to unite if we're going to succeed in overcoming the ills of non-transparent hierarchical control. We can see that our governments and the corporate media don't serve us. They trick us into going down the path of greater totalitarian control. We must resist mainstream narratives that involve good people versus bad people. Visible members of our government participate in a pantomime designed to manipulate, distract, and deceive. We need to be less concerned about what the pantomime puppets are doing and more concerned about what we can do. We, the people, need to develop our abilities to work together to bring about a truthful, peaceful, and democratic world. A more democratic world must involve the creation of transparency through journalism that Julian Assange successfully developed with WikiLeaks, and which the organs of present-day power are working to suppress. If our established political puppets were sincere about democracy and a free press, they would be working tirelessly to free Julian Assange. This task has been left to us. We need the kind of journalism that can bring about transparent democracy. We must do what we can to have it. Mainstream politicians and corporate media are involved in the obfuscation of the true mechanisms of power. These mechanisms prevent us enjoying a free, just, and peaceful world. Transparency is the solution, and Julian Assange brought that solution into being. We must show our unity with Julian's solution. We must free Julian Assange. Free! 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 Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Thank you.
Don't let all this bullshit distract you from what's really going on in the world. You need to tap into yourself. What's really going on? All this dude, Julian, all he was trying to do was speak his mind, tell the truth, and look where it gets him. They've got him in jail in England trying to extradite him over to America, and God knows what they're going to do to him if they extradite him over there. You know, the world we live in. Think about Epstein, for example. People said that was a conspiracy theory. Now it's a fact. The New World Order, conspiracy theory. In 2020, during COVID, they came out, they said, this New World Order. It's just getting worse and worse. We're about to be in a society with no cash, you know? And in reality, to what I know, maybe not Australia, but in America, I think it's around 15 to 25% of money is actually in cash. So what's the rest of it? So don't listen to the news, don't listen to social media. Listen to yourself and do your own research and believe, you know, with your own eyes what you see, you know? Because especially if you're younger, you're my age or whatever, watching this, we're the future, we're the next generation, we're the ones that are gonna have to make the world better, you know? Because, you know, we can't let these people brainwash us no more, because it's just gonna get worse and worse, I promise ya. Like, it makes no sense. We go 100 years without any pandemic type thing.
That's why we don't need all these old ass politicians.
2020, COVID. You know, everything after COVID, a bunch of stuff, everything just started getting weird. And then recently they just announced out of nowhere that, you know, they have, you know, the remains of a crashed UFO and stuff like that in a Congress meeting, saying, and the dude said, were there biologics found in the crashed spacecraft? And the dude said yes. The lady goes, were they human biologics? And he goes, no. So why would they come out with that now? So, you know, you just got to take a look, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, you know, you really just got to take a look, tap in. It's insane, but yeah, we're the generation that needs to make a difference, you know? And I pray to God that we all stand up and eventually see how fucked up the world is, because, you know, we outnumber them. They're called the 1% for a reason, you know? Anyway, that's my rant over. Miss DDB talking. Shout out to everybody here. All love, you know.
Hi everyone. The government is inviting the general public to make submissions regarding the public's opinion on the new social media censorship bill which the government wants to introduce. The government are accepting public submissions up until the 20th of August, and they have a website where it's very, very easy to upload your opinion. And you're also protected, everyone's protected under parliamentary privilege, so you can basically say what you like, just keep it polite. The social media censorship bill is actually called Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill. But it should be called social media censorship because that's exactly what it is. Some things that you might want to write about are the Orwellian nature of the proposed legislation, as in from George Orwell's novel 1984, where all truth comes only from the Ministry of Truth, the relationship between free speech and democracy, how censorship of social media prevents the public from being correctly informed on important issues of public interest, that is to say, on inconvenient truths which the mainstream media refuses to report on. How through information censorship the public's opinion is controlled, and with limited opinion the public will have nothing with which to hold the government to account. Democracy equals the ability of the people to hold government to account, but that cannot happen without a well-informed opinion. Contrast the lies mostly through omission of the mainstream media with that of the independent media that use social media platforms to fill in the information gaps. Give examples of media lies, for example, Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. That never existed. And more recently, the rising threat of China and the lies mostly through omission about events leading up to the war in Ukraine. The silence on who blew up the Nord Stream gas pipeline and why. There's plenty of them, all exposed by independent media which the government wants to silence for your safety. The disingenuous way the government is trying to sell the bill. Do they think we are stupid? They certainly hope we are. The role independent media, which the government wants to silence, plays in bolstering democracy. The government wants to suppress that. Does the government really want to keep the public safe on the internet? Or do they want to keep themselves safe from the public? Does the government prefer the public to be ignorant so that there will be not so much public opposition to draconian policy? By the government deliberately being vague about what constitutes information and disinformation and harm, the service providers who will be expected by the government to actually carry out the censorship of content on their platforms, which host social media, will need to guess what the government doesn't like and remove it in advance to keep themselves safe from eye-wateringly huge fines imposed by the government. The scope of censorship, therefore, will be very broad. The fact that only information on social media can be considered to be disinformation and misinformation, and that the government communication and the mainstream media are exempt, the censorship only applies to social media. Ironically, since the government and mainstream media are the main sources of the dis and misinformation which they want to keep you safe from. The way that the government, via the mainstream media, conjures up a fictitious enemy which they demonise in order to manufacture public consent to commit atrocities in the name of a noble cause. All of these things you can write about in your submission, and you have up until the 20th of August. So please, don't miss out on the opportunity while you still have it.
Thing where they're like, she's talking to the sister, and the sister's like,
We are all Assange.